My name is Chris. Welcome to the Ancient Oak, where we are discussing my personal journey from Christianity into Wicca, or British traditional witchcraft. Last video, we left off with sort of me giving a broad overview of why I became a Christian in the first place, more specifically, how I ended up in the Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches. And if you want to watch that, I recommend going to Walking Away from Christianity Part 1 to get an idea of where I was at. So I'm not going to draw that out anymore. I'll just go right into sort of the second part of this, which is what happened when I left Christianity and sort of fell into a state of non-belief. I think for a lot of people who are leaving the Christian faith, especially if you've been in it your whole life, it's very difficult. It's like losing a friend. It's like losing a family member. You had this thing that was so close to you for so much of your life that felt like a deep personal relationship. And that's what it is when you're a Christian. You have a deep personal relationship with God. And when you walk away from that, it can feel very tough. And I'm speaking to anyone out there who might be going through this same thing or is considering going through the same thing. I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's tough. It feels like loss. And there is a grieving process to go through in doing that. And just as a quick aside, I would definitely caution anybody who is considering leaving the Christian faith, or if you're looking into Wicca and you're coming from Christianity, excuse me, feel free to take it slow. Don't worry about rushing this. I haven't rushed it. I have taken 2 years to fully sort of process this loss and take my time moving into a new community very slowly. If you end up joining a traditional Wiccan coven or a Gardnerian coven or Alexandrian coven, they usually have a period of what's called outer court, where you have to spend a set period of time, usually a year and a day, slowly acclimating yourself to the system of belief. And they give you a good long period of time often to see if this is what you want to do. And there's no pressure, there's no commitments, and it's a good way to see if this is what's for you. And that's the process I'm currently in right now. So I would say that yes, if you're looking at leaving the Christian faith, you're probably going to have maybe a lot of the same experience as I did, which was a lot of loss, a lot of grief. It feels hard. And there's also the more unfortunate aspect of leaving, and maybe this happens with leaving a lot of different religious traditions. I can't speak for that, but I know in my experience it's tough because there's a lot of pushback from people who don't understand what you're doing, and they especially if you're entering into something like Wicca, it seems very bizarre to some people, and I can understand, and I'll leave it at that. But it's a personal journey, and it's something that not everybody will understand, and I don't expect everybody to understand. I don't really talk to many people about it. These videos are these are really the first time I've ever talked about it publicly. I don't make it anyone else's business. That's just the type of person I am. What I do in my personal life is my business, and I don't ask people what they're doing in their personal lives unless they want to talk about it. But there does come this period of time where you're going to get a little bit of blowback from the people that were in your community. And that's understandable. You have to, I would say, it's easy for people to bash Christianity and bash religions because of that sort of in-group mentality. But I would say you almost can't blame them. You have to look at it from their perspective. These are people that truly believe that the church they're a part of is your way to salvation, your way to enter into heaven. And to see you, they see you leaving that, and in a way it probably breaks their heart. They probably feel like you're abandoning something that's the most important thing in the world. So I would just advise a lot of people to just be patient with those around you, and they're not going to necessarily understand, and that's fine. It's not their job to understand. You don't have to make them understand. This is my journey, and this is your journey, and it doesn't. What people think, it doesn't matter. There's always going to be people that respect what you're doing. There's always going to be people that hate what you're doing. And the vast majority of the people in between those two categories could care less. So that's a good way to look at it. But yeah, after leaving Christianity and then ending up for not too long, I didn't spend too long going down the atheist rabbit hole, because, it's something I'd always been aware of and entertained for a long time. Even when I was a Christian, it's not like I wasn't aware of arguments for atheism. I just didn't find them convincing until I was willing to take a step back and look at my own practices, and then they started making a lot more sense. So what happened was the idea of ending up as an atheist did not appeal to me. I had always very much loved the communal nature of religious practice. I always liked having a community to be a part of, people to be around who shared my beliefs. There's obviously something comforting in that. I'm very introverted, and I like being alone, and so I like the opportunities to get out and have those interactions with people, because for me they're a little few and far between. So I like that about going to church, and that's one of the reasons why, and I'll get into that later, why I decided to, instead of looking at just a solitary practice as a Wiccan, I was very much interested, pretty much right from the get-go, in entering into a coven. So, but yeah, back to my point. So there was a period of time right after I left Christianity that I was definitely feeling like I had just stepped into complete void, and I had nothing in my life. It was rather depressing. I'm not gonna lie. It felt not good to no longer have relative assurance of my salvation, or where I'm gonna go after death, or who is God. I lost the answers to all those questions, and it was both liberating and terrifying at the same time. So after probably 6-7 months of not going to church, not being a practicing Christian, not reading anything theological, only digging into the atheist perspective, I think I kind of hit a wall there, and I said, well, this is interesting, and it's helped me overcome a lot of my fears of leaving Christianity. But now I'm ready for something else. I'm ready to see what else is out there. The last thing I wanted to do was end up as a Wiccan. I was not even aware of what that was. It was the last thing on my radar. What I was exploring was Zen Buddhism, or maybe just sort of a non-religious type of Buddhism, where maybe I could get into a meditation practice or study the philosophies of Buddhism, which I had, again, done, earlier in my life, but I'd never taken it seriously, though I've always found it a very beautiful faith, and I've been to Buddhist monasteries, and it's an amazing experience. So I was looking at maybe that. But what drew me into the Wiccan practice, almost by pure happenstance, was just my own already existing rituals as a traditional Christian. So what I started doing was very simple things. At night, I would light a candle. I would burn some incense. And it made me very thankful to have a practice back in my life, even if it was something so simple as just lighting a candle. It was something. It was me acknowledging again that I'm reaching out to whatever is out there. I didn't even know exactly what I was doing in the process of lighting candles and burning incense. It felt good. I was thankful to be thankful again, and it felt good to have something in my life that was spiritual. Let's just put it at that. It felt like I was doing something spiritual again, and that was very relieving. And it filled a little bit of a void in my heart that I had left there for a period of time, and it was nice. And I'll just leave it at that. That's all it was. It was nothing more profound, nothing more complicated. And that sort of transitioned as I went on through the months into developing what I guess you would call a ritual. I guess at this point I would say it's a personal practice, a morning ritual is what I would call it. I like waking up early when I can. I'm always not the most successful at it, but when I do, it's always very enjoyable to watch the sunrise. I have a very nice eastern-facing window where I can watch the sun come up. And so what I started doing was, in the mornings, I would just light a orange candle on my altar. I already had an altar that existed from when I was a Catholic, but I'd sort of stripped it down to its basic elements, and it was just a wooden table at this point. But I would light an orange candle in the morning and just sit there and watch the sunrise. And again, it was no more complicated than that. I wasn't looking at the sun as a deity. I wasn't saying anything as a prayer. It was just the acknowledgement of the sun rising and being thankful for another day and for this burning ball of gas that keeps us all going. And it was nice to just wake up and have something to acknowledge as greater than myself. And so how this transitioned into me becoming more interested in what I would learn later on is called Wicca, is simply by, out of sheer not wanting to go to religious stores that I had used to go to buy incense and candles and such, Catholic supply stores or whatever. I ended up going to, I guess, what you could broadly call our New Age stores. Some of them are more specifically geared towards Wicca or witchcraft or various other occult practices, but I ended up going to these stores just simply to buy the tactile things I needed to do these rituals. I needed charcoal, I needed incense, I needed candles. So I ended up going to these stores to buy the things I needed. And by simply going into these stores and being exposed to this sort of world, I did probably what countless thousands of people have done before. I picked up the most basic book I could, which was Scott Cunningham's book on the solitary practitioner. I think who knows how many people started off their journey with that book. A lot of people, I would imagine. It's a absolutely great introduction to what Wicca is. Not necessarily the British traditional witchcraft side of it, but the solitary, eclectic version of Wicca. But there's a lot of crossover. So for someone who's trying to get some information on this topic, I mean, that book is an absolute gem of information. And then later I went on to pick up books from people who I feel incredibly indebted to this day, specifically Thorn Mooney, and her two books on witchcraft have been great for someone coming into the practice. She's a clear, great writer. I'll leave it at that. And that's really the short and simple of how I ended up initially coming into contact with Wiccan practices. It would develop much more over the next year and a half, but that was my first initial entry point into what would eventually become something that just absolutely captivated my imagination and my attention. But I'd like to go back and talk about I would like to talk more about what it is to leave Christianity. The thing about leaving Christianity is that, like most monotheistic religions, it is viewed by its practitioners as being the only religion that is true. And so what you're going to get when you leave that system is a lot of fear, because that has been drilled into your head for who knows how long, depending on who you are. For me, 20 years. It's drilled into your head that to leave the faith is to essentially ensure that you will spend an eternity in hell. And that is a very hard thing for someone to come to grips with. And I don't really have a lot of advice about how to overcome that. I think it happens naturally in the same way that people grieve loss. At first, it's a very prominent thing in your mind, but as time passes and heals that wound, it starts to slowly fade away. Especially if you have new experiences, new spiritual experiences that begin to touch your heart in the same way that your Christian experiences did. It starts to fill that void, and it makes you realize, well, those deep spiritual experiences that I was having with Christianity, I can have in other contexts. And when you realize that, it makes that step out of the faith a lot easier, because you see that it's not an exclusive claim to Christianity to have profound religious experiences. In fact, it's universally experienced by people of all faiths. And I know that seems very common sense. I mean, from an outside perspective, you would say, well, obviously everybody in all religions have incredibly deep, profound experiences. But as I'd mentioned in the last video, when you're in a bubble, it's hard to imagine that. Especially when I was in the monastery as an Orthodox Christian trying to be a monk, I had some really, I guess what you could say were deep spiritual experiences that I didn't think I would ever be able to replicate. But as it happens, I have been able to replicate those things simply by really acknowledging the power of nature. I love to go hiking. I do a lot of landscape photography. So I try to spend as much time outside as possible. I probably should do it more, but I love going out to national parks or state parks and just getting out into beautiful natural landscapes. And there's something just as spiritually profound about hiking up in a mountain as there is reading a book about the nature of the soul, or praying for 5 hours straight in a monastery. And so once I started to see that those experiences were not exclusive, it became a lot easier to consider walking away. And once I did, and once I fully walked away from that, it was a great relief. And I was more ready and more willing to open up my heart to let new things in, like Wicca, to let these things start touching my heart instead of looking at them through a very critical lens, which I would have done as a Christian. I would have read any book on Wicca and been incredibly critical of it in a bad way, but now that I was in a new place, I was willing to read something and be open to different teachings. And the beautiful thing about it is there was no, and some people might look at this as a negative thing about Wicca, especially if you're a very traditional Christian. You'd probably look at this as a downfall, because as a Christian, we really value our dogmas. They are what set us apart from other faiths, and so it was very relieving to come into Wicca and not have to really commit to any particular belief. I could keep my mind open and my heart open to different experiences, and that was absolutely amazing. thank you so much for watching the video. We're going to leave it at that for today, and I'll pick up at a later time. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and I will try to get back to you as quick as I can, because I'm really interested in starting a dialogue here with people about this journey and to see who out there who is having a similar experience. So thank you very much, and I will see you at the next video.